Are there some or several reasons that make us unhealthy? If you know what I mean, just like for instance, smoking or bad nutrition. Are those things that make us less healthy?
Well, I think the first question should be, how do you define health?
Mm-hmm.
What does it mean to you guys to be healthy?
To be full of energy and no pain.
Free of pain, full of energy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anything else? Those answers were good, by the way.
Oh, yes.
Thanks.
We've passed the test.
Yes.
Not that come into mind like right away. But.
A lot of people, basically, when I ask that question, tell me having a lack of symptoms or complaints equals health.
Mm-hmm.
But if you look at the World Health Organization's definition of health, it states health is being in a state of complete physical, social, and mental well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or symptoms. So you can feel good and still be sick.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you be healthy? Knowing what it takes to be healthy and doing it on a regular and consistent basis. We call that being pure and sufficient in the things that people need to be well. And if you're not, then you're toxic and deficient, and those things lead to disease over time. So it's not just about knowing what makes us sick, it's also about knowing what we need to do to be well and doing it, even if you don't like doing it.
Discipline.
Yeah.
But it takes less discipline when it becomes tied in with your why.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you value health, then you'll look into what it takes to be healthy and you'll do it. And mostly you'll do it because you know that if you're healthy, everything else you value in life will benefit.
Mm-hmm.
Most people put family as their number one value. But if they're not the healthiest version of themselves, their family suffers. I see that with my mothers all the time in practice. They put everyone else first because I think it's the most important thing, and their health declines, and that can't be a good thing for the family. So that was a bit of a long way to answer your question. And I didn't even give you any answers.
But I think it is good to think about what is health to me.
Yeah. And if you, so the chiropractic philosophy that I was talking about before, the one I fell in love with that first day, was that chiropractic, the philosophy is that health is default. We're designed to be well.
Mm-hmm.
And in order to be the healthiest version of yourself, the most important organ in your body needs to work at its best, the centrales and your stelsel. When it works at its best, because your spine is free of a blockada or subluxation, then the innate intelligence that created the body, that heals the body, that allows the body to shift into balance and therefore better health, gets to flow free of interference, and that shifts you towards a better standard of life, which is exactly the definition of health.
Mm-hmm.
If you think about it, it's just one requirement. It's just one box that needs ticking, is a healthy nervous system. It's as important as good food and exercise. The only difference is people can question it because it leads to problems over a period of time, but it's still a requirement. Nobody I know ever questions oxygen. No one ever says, nah,
Don't need it.
don't need it. Because if they did, they'd die in 3 minutes, right?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, having a blockada doesn't kill you in 3 minutes, because if it did, then we'd have everybody in our office getting checked, and that would be that'd be amazing. So yeah, I'm sure.
But what causes a blockade?
Yes.
I guess there are multiple and several answers, but in general, is there something that you can like pinpoint, perhaps in daily life, or
Well, first of all,
affects it?
it's all tied in with what I was just saying.
Mm-hmm.
If you have too much stress on your system because you're not living in a complete state of physical, mental, and social well-being,
Mm-hmm.
that stress builds up and accumulates over time, and that it essentially results in a blockada, in a stress point forming in your body. Now, the tricky thing is a blockada happens to be a stress point that causes more stress points.
Mm-hmm.
So it becomes a bit of a vicious loop. But what are some of the big things? I mean, don't get hit by a car or fall out of a tree.
Okay.
That'll cause a blockada.
Okay. Yeah.
of course, nowadays we're sitting behind desks
Yeah.
a bit too much and not moving enough. So it's the combination of those two, not just poor housing, but not enough exercise, quality movement. Emotional stress. People come in telling me all the time that they feel their stress in their shoulders or in their low back, or some people not even in their back but in their darmen. Yeah, Bauchproblemen. So yeah, it's really a combination. It's really about knowing how to live life by design, and that's how you prevent a blockada.
Yeah.
Which we talk about. You're gonna have to pay for that. No, I'm joking. We'll give some more hints and tips as we go through.
I recently, like in preparation of this podcast, I was wondering, we people see ourselves perhaps as great beings, being kind of on top of the food chain. How come that lots of people have bad backs? It's
a good question. I think we could probably go outside of that and say, why do so many people have poor health?
Mm-hmm.
Like if you look at the adult population as we speak right now, 80% of the adult population has a diagnosed chronic illness.
Okay.
And a chronic illness is a disease of lifestyle, a disease of choice, right? So of course, if you've got less health potential, you have the ability to also get back pain, neck pain, headaches, and migraines, the things that benefit from in our office. But it comes from having less health. But the scary thing is, it's 50% of the entire population now that has a diagnosed chronic illness, which means kids, young people. And a good example is they had to change the name of type 2 diabetes. They changed it from adult onset diabetes because it wasn't coming on in adults anymore. It was coming on in children. So they just changed the name from adult onset to type 2 diabetes. It's a chronic illness caused by disease of lifestyle, disease of choice. So people have forgotten how to eat, move, and think by design. We're living in a world that we're not wired for. Our genes are 50,000 years old, depending on what your belief system is. But our lifestyles changed dramatically 10,000 years ago. And as a result, we've never been sicker. I always talk about, when you look at a killer whale in SeaWorld in America, how does the killer whale look? With his dorsal fin all droopy. Does he look like a happy, sprightly killer whale or a depressed one?
Yeah, like a depressed one.
It's because he's living in a pool.
Yeah.
He's supposed to live in the ocean. He's supposed to catch his food instead of being fed. You took him out of his environment, you put him in one he didn't belong in, and he gets sick. And it happens at zoos too. They give lions now blood pressure medication when they get sick because that's the answer.
Yeah.
Do you think that is similar to humans as well? Put them in a different environment.
Yeah, absolutely. We're wild animals living in captivity. If you put a cow in a pen and feed it corn, it'll get fat real quick, which is good for business, but not good for the cow. And if you put a human in a pen, i.e. a desk, and you feed him grains, i.e. look at the food pyramid, the very bottom, all those grains, he'll get fat, sick and unhealthy too. Not to mention all the emotional stress we have to deal with now. They say we're under more stress in one day than our ancestors were in a whole year. So that's why we're so sick. And then the people we turn to help us get better think that the answers lie with drugs and surgery, which is amazing because it can save your life, but it can never recreate your health. If you try to treat a disease of lifestyle with drugs and surgery, you essentially make people feel better whilst allowing them to commit suicide. That's a bit harsh, but it's true. I'm getting a bit fired up.
Getting fired up.
Yeah.
Good questions. Good questions. Do you think that's a controversial statement, or is that what you guys see when you look to the world as well? Do you see fit, happy, healthy people? What do you guys see?
No, if I can speak for myself, I think I also have some issues with the world we live in these days, and it's also has effects on my health, I think. Yeah, so that that sounds a bit how I look at the world. Yeah.
And it's pretty topical at the moment. if you think of COVID,
Mm-hmm.
I think it's quite clear now we can call it can I call it a pandemic of the unhealthy? Would you guys take offense to that?
I don't.
No, no.
The CDC said 94% of people that end up in hospital, intensive care and or dying from COVID had at least 4 comorbidities, 4 diseases of lifestyle.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And we wonder why we're so sick.
Makes you think.
We won't even talk about why we'd vaccinate everybody instead of just the sick people, but maybe we can talk about that on another podcast. Unless you want to talk about it now.
Yeah.
It's up to you. If you say if you have like a strong opinion, and you say I would like to talk about it.
How do you guys feel about the possibility of having to have a COVID vaccine in the future? When they make it mandatory, if they make it mandatory, like in my country.
Yeah.
Would that
Yeah.
be-
Is it in Australia? Is it mandatory already? Okay.
Yeah. They've got dates set now for first and second jabs before you won't be able to go to work.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, I think we also have strong opinions about that, but also we try to be healthy, and we think if we do our best to be healthy, and we have an immune system that fights off viruses, and yeah, I think we don't really need that, especially people of our age, yeah, and healthy people with no comorbidities.
I mean, the evidence it's there.
Yeah,
So I think there was to be diplomatic, there is a role for vaccine to protect the people that need protecting, and we know quite clearly now who those people are. But to force it on healthy people it was the mistake that was made, I think. And the more you read, I read some information from the people that report adverse reactions from the vaccine,
Mm-hmm.
that already, since the COVID vaccines were rolled out, we've had more adverse reactions reported than in the history of vaccination.
yeah.
So that's also something
To keep in mind.
to keep in mind, right, when you're making that decision.
Yeah.
But how do you cope with that personally? Because as you say, in Australia it is mandatory, and I presume you have a lot of friends, family, etc. in Australia, and here it isn't mandatory yet.
Yet.
So how do you
And
cope with that?
Hopefully not. Well, we find it very frustrating. I mean, now we're going into a bit of a rabbit hole, but I think people in Australia are scared because of how they're communicated to by the media.
Yeah, yeah.
So I try to share as much information as possible. I'm prepared to take the criticism.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny though, because the friends and family back home don't often comment on posts that I put on Facebook, and I wonder if that's because they know that I'm fairly well prepared to argue or debate back with them.
Yeah.
But we find it frustrating and scary, and it's a big enough motivation for us to never go home.
Mm-hmm.
That's how we feel. If the rules don't change, we're staying here forever.
Yeah, yeah. And also the cases and people dying of COVID in Australia is not much.
No. Melbourne.
But they have the most drastically measurements.
No.
Yeah, measure.
Melbourne's the most locked down city in the world for this whole period of time, and their numbers are like, we had 30,000 new cases here last week, I think, in the Netherlands, and the people in hospital and the people dying was still very, very low.
Yeah,
and those numbers are much higher than what's happening in Australia.
yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy.
But every country deals with it differently.
Yeah, because Australia's got a different story, being isolated, being an island.
Yeah. Okay.
They took on different strategies, but
Yeah.
we feel quite blessed for our timing.
Yeah.